Have you ever been blamed for a massive disaster at work or in your personal life when you just knew that the favorites, the people who can do no wrong, were actually the ones who caused it?
Oh, absolutely. It's the classic scapegoat scenario.
Right. Well, today we are doing a deep dive into a 10,000-year-old royal cover-up, a citywide witch hunt, and the stray dog who literally invented a brilliant piece of forensics to solve it.
It is such an incredible narrative.
It really is. So welcome to the Simplified Awakening YouTube channel. If you enjoy deep dives into ancient wisdom that maps perfectly onto our modern lives, please humbly hit subscribe, like this video, and share your valuable comments below.
Because this story is basically an absolute masterclass in fighting a rigged system.
Exactly. So our mission today is to explore a single narrative from a massive ancient collection known as the Jataka. We're looking specifically at the 1895 English translation edited by E.B. Cowell.
Right, and just for context, the Jataka is this foundational collection of folklore framed as the previous incarnations of the Buddha.
Yeah, and today our focus is entirely on Jataka number 22. It's the Kukkura Jataka, which translates simply to the Dog Jataka. We're going to narrate the full story for you and extract the actual mechanisms of how the protagonist survives this, highly politically charged witch hunt.
And what stands out immediately in the Kukkura Jataka is that, while we are reading a religious text from antiquity, the human behavioral dynamics are just so entirely modern.
Oh, 100%. The middle management panic, the weaponization of bias, the reflexive anger of an executive.
Yeah, it's all right there.
So let's get into it. We start in ancient Benares during the reign of King Brahmadatta. And the text sets a very specific scene here. The king sets out for his royal park in this magnificent state chariot drawn by milk-white horses.
Very flashy.
Very. He spends a day amusing himself, returns to the city after sunset, but in the courtyard, the servants make a critical logistical error.
Right, the inciting incident.
Exactly. They leave the carriage harness out overnight. It's still hitched to the chariot, and then it rains. So the leatherwork and the straps get completely soaked and, they soften up.
And the environmental factor here is really the catalyst, because without the rain, the leather remains rigid and completely unappealing to an animal.
Okay, wait, let's unpack this for a second. Because up in the upper chambers of the palace, the king's own pampered thoroughbred royal dogs smell this wet leather. They sneak down into the courtyard in the middle of the night, and they completely gnaw the leather straps to pieces.
Which seems counterintuitive, right?
Yeah. If these are elite pampered dogs eating the highest quality royal food, why are they chewing on rigid leather chariot straps? That seems like the behavior of a starving stray.
Well, it does, which actually explains why the servant's lie later on is so easily believed by the king.
So is there a biological reason for the royal dogs doing this?
It's a great question, and it really comes down to instinct overriding domestication. Because even well-fed dogs have this deep predatory drive linked to scent and texture. So rainwater rehydrates the cured animal hide, and that releases the natural salts and organic compounds that were used in ancient tanning processes.
Oh, wow. So it smells like food.
Exactly. For a dog, regardless of its pedigree, that scent profile triggers a very primal wolf ancestry response. So it's less about hunger and more about this irresistible, highly stimulating texture and taste of the rehydrated hide.
That makes total sense. So the royal dogs destroy the harness and sneak back upstairs. The next day, the servants come out, they discover the chariot is ruined, and they immediately recognize the bite marks.
They know exactly who did it.
Right, they know the royal dogs did it.
Yeah.
But they are terrified of the king's wrath, primarily because their own negligence in leaving the chariot out allowed this to happen in the first place.
Of course. Self-preservation kicks in.
Yep. So they decide to cover for the thoroughbreds. They go to the king with this blatant, calculated lie. They say, "Sire, dogs have got in through the mouth of the sewer and have gnawed the leatherwork and straps of your majesty's carriage."
Now, notice the precise framing of that lie. It's very intentional.
How so?
Well, in ancient Benares, the sewer represents ultimate pollution.
Oh, right.
So by telling the king that dogs have got in through the mouth of the sewer, the servants aren't just pointing the finger at external strays. They are actively invoking a deep cultural revulsion.
Oh, I see. They're weaponizing his disgust.
Exactly. They are weaponizing the king's inherent prejudice against the outside world to protect the privileged dogs inside and, by extension, themselves.
That's fascinating. It's like the king's justice system here is acting exactly like a poorly configured spam filter.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, it's automatically flagging all the external elements, the strays, as malicious while completely ignoring the malware that's actively destroying the local network from the inside.
That is highly accurate, because the king doesn't ask to inspect the sewer. He doesn't go look for muddy paw prints.
No investigation at all.
None. He acts entirely on unverified data provided by panicked subordinates, simply because it perfectly aligns with his confirmation bias.
Right. The outside is dirty and destructive. The inside is pure and loyal.
Exactly.
So, driven entirely by this unchecked rage, the king issues a brutal, sweeping decree. He says, kill every dog you see.
It's just a devastating overreaction.
It is. A wholesale slaughter of stray dogs begins in the streets of Benares. And, I mean, what does this say about the nature of power in these sources?
Well, it really highlights the terrifying nature of absolute power. When leadership reacts emotionally without demanding verifiable data, the consequences always fall on the most vulnerable populations.
Yeah, the intern's getting fired for the CEO's mistake.
Pretty much. The strays are paying the ultimate price for a middle management cover-up.
Which brings us to the cemetery outside the city walls. The street dogs realize they're being slaughtered on sight, and they flee to this great cemetery.
And this is where the protagonist comes in.
Yes, this is where we meet the Bodhisatta, the Buddha, in a previous life, who has been born as a dog and operates as the leader of several hundred strays.
Right.
So the terrified survivors run to him, and they explain the massacre and the king's decree.
And here we see a stark contrast in leadership models.
Yeah, totally different approaches.
The king, who is sitting in supreme safety, reacted to a damaged chariot with absolute destructive panic. But the Bodhisatta, facing a literal existential threat to his entire species, reacts with profound analytical calm.
Which is so cool. The text notes that the Bodhisatta actually thinks to himself, no dogs from without can get into a place so closely watched.
He's analyzing the crime scene constraints.
Exactly. He knows the physical architecture of the palace. He knows the walls are high and the gates are guarded. So he deduces, purely through a process of elimination, that the true culprits must be the thoroughbred palace dogs.
It's pure logic.
But wait, this raises a textual question for me.
Yeah.
Usually in ancient folklore, the hero relies on a magical boon or a spell or divine intervention to solve an impossible problem.
But right, the gods usually step in.
Yeah. So why does this Jataka focus so heavily on raw deductive reasoning?
Because the Jataka tales are designed to illustrate different perfections or virtues that are required for enlightenment.
Okay.
And in this specific tale, the focus is on prajna, which means wisdom and deep insight. The narrative strips away the supernatural to emphasize that clarity of thought is actually a higher virtue than magic.
So he's basically running a mental algorithm.
Exactly. If premise A, sewer dogs bypassing armed guards, is physically impossible, then premise B, the internal dogs, must be true, regardless of how improbable it seems to the king. He finds the physical flaw in the king's narrative.
I love that. So he promises his followers he will save them, and he marches straight into the city, right into the palace.
Very bold move.
Very. He walks directly up to the king and just sits beneath the king's chair.
And placing himself under the king's chair is a really fascinating physical choice in the text.
How so? Like submitting to him?
Yes, it's a position of total vulnerability, submitting to the king's physical authority. But at the same time, it is a position of profound intimacy. He's forcing a direct, face-to-face confrontation with power.
Wow. And he immediately begins questioning the king's definition of justice. The dog points out that the decree isn't impartial. It spares the royal dogs while condemning the innocent street dogs.
Right.
And he delivers this staggering line from the 1895 translation. The dog says, "Here's no impartial sentence meted out to all alike, 'tis slaughter of the poor."
Slaughter of the poor. I mean, when you consider the antiquity of the source material, that phrase is just remarkable.
It gave me chills reading it.
It completely shifts the narrative from a simple animal fable into this piercing sociological critique. The dog is looking directly at the monarch and stating that the justice system possesses a blind spot.
And that blind spot perfectly mirrors the monarch's own class privilege. The king's reaction here is crucial, though, because he doesn't immediately execute the dog for treason.
Which he easily could have done.
Right. Instead, he actually listens, and he challenges the dog. He essentially says, well, if you know the truth, who actually did it?
And the dog replies that it was the king's own thoroughbreds.
Yes. And the king's response is the pivot of the entire story. He says, how can it be shown? Prove it.
This is the critical juncture regarding the burden of proof. The king is open to having his worldview challenged, but, rhetoric and righteous indignation are not enough to overturn a deeply entrenched prejudice.
Right, he needs more than just a good argument.
The system will not accept an argument. It demands undeniable evidence.
Which brings us to the absolute most brilliant part of the story. The dog invents an ancient forensic test.
Basically ancient CSI.
It really is. He tells the king to bring the royal dogs in, and he requests a very specific mixture to be made, a blend of buttermilk and mashed kusa grass.
Very specific ingredients.
Yeah, so the king has his servants prepare this, and he feeds it to his royal dogs. As soon as they consume it, they immediately violently expel chunks of the chewed carriage leather right there on the palace floor.
The truth literally materializes in front of the king.
Yes. But wait, how does this actually work? Is kusa grass some sort of mythical magic ingredient?
Not at all. Kusa grass, which is known botanically as Desmostachia bipinata, is a highly rigid, sharp-edged grass native to the region.
Okay.
So the Bodhisatta is applying indigenous veterinary science here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When you finely mash a highly abrasive fiber like kusa grass and suspend it in a heavy acidic dairy base like buttermilk, it creates a powerful natural emetic.
So it makes them throw up.
Exactly. The sharp edges of the grass severely irritate the gastric mucosa of the dog's stomach, while the buttermilk rapidly coagulates, and this triggers a completely involuntary biological reflex to expel the stomach contents.
That is brilliant. So the insight here isn't just that, evidence is good. It's that when you are challenging a rigged system, you cannot use the system's own language to win.
That's a great point.
Because the servants used rhetoric, loyalty, and cultural bias. The dog couldn't beat that with more rhetoric. He had to introduce an external, undeniable biological variable that the system was utterly incapable of spinning.
Exactly. You have to force the reality of the situation out into the physical world. The Bodhisatta understood that the king would never take the word of a cemetery dog over his trusted inner circle.
Right, the cognitive dissonance would just be too great.
But the king could not deny the biological reality occurring on his own floor. The chewed leather suspended in buttermilk bypassed the king's bias entirely.
The vomit doesn't lie.
It's crude, but it is absolute.
I am so fascinated by the king's reaction to this, too. When the leather hits the floor, the king isn't embarrassed. He isn't angry at being proven a fool by a stray dog.
Which is surprising for an absolute monarch.
Very. The text notes he is actually overjoyed. He calls the dog's deduction the judgment of a perfect Buddha. And in this grand, sweeping gesture, the king offers the royal white umbrella to the dog.
And to understand the weight of that gesture, we really have to look at the historical significance of the royal white umbrella, or the chhatra.
Okay, what does it mean?
Well, in ancient Indian culture, the white umbrella wasn't just a sunshade. It was the ultimate symbol of sovereignty. It represented the dome of heaven sheltering the earth, and only the supreme ruler sat beneath it.
Oh, wow. So it's like handing over the crown.
Literally. By offering it to the dog, the king is offering the throne. He is recognizing that true merit, wisdom, and justice reside not in his own royal lineage, but in this stray from the cemetery.
That is incredible. But the dog refuses the umbrella. However, he does accept the platform it provides.
He seizes the moment.
Yeah. He uses this moment of total vindication to preach to the king. He instructs the king to walk righteously and establishes him in the 5 commandments.
Right, core Buddhist tenets like abstaining from taking life and refraining from theft.
And this elevates the story from a clever detective procedural to a real roadmap for systemic reform.
It does. Because the dog does not use his victory to gain personal power or, exact revenge on the servants who started all this.
He doesn't ask for them to be executed.
No. He uses his leverage to restructure the moral framework of the person who holds the monopoly on violence.
And we see that restructuring happen immediately. The king revokes the slaughter decree, obviously, guaranteeing safety for all living creatures. But he goes one step further, which I think is just the most profound part of this whole deep dive.
Oh, the food decree?
Yes. He orders that from that day forward, all dogs in the kingdom, whether they are thoroughbreds sleeping in the palace or strays living in the cemetery, will receive the exact same high-quality food that the king himself eats.
That detail is brilliant because it addresses the root sociological cause of the conflict.
How so?
Well, it is one thing for a leader to admit a mistake and stop an execution order. That is simply halting immediate harm.
Right.
It is a completely different, much higher level of leadership to analyze the systemic inequality that allowed the bias to flourish in the first place. By guaranteeing that all dogs receive royal food, the king is eliminating the resource scarcity that created the you versus them dynamic.
He is systematically dismantling the class divide.
Exactly.
He didn't just patch the spam filter, he redesigned the entire network architecture.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And the text concludes with the Buddha, who, remember, is narrating this story to his followers, revealing the historical identities of the players. He explains that his closest, most faithful disciple, Ananda, was the king in that past life, and the Buddha himself was the dog.
And it leaves us with this incredible final note, doesn't it?
It does. It says the dog's teaching endured for 10,000 years.
Which serves as a really powerful thesis on the durability of truth. A system built on prejudice and unverified assumptions is incredibly fragile.
I mean, it was entirely undone by a handful of grass and a bowl of buttermilk.
Exactly. But a system that is fundamentally restructured around verifiable evidence, equity, and a leader's willingness to be corrected, that kind of structural integrity lasts for millennia.
It fundamentally changes how we should approach defending ourselves today. When the narrative is stacked against you, righteous anger rarely works.
But it almost never works.
You need the kusa grass. You need the undeniable data point that forces the truth onto the table.
But it also requires us to turn that analytical lens inward.
Ooh, what do you mean?
Well, if we look closely at our own lives, our workplaces, and our relationships, we really have to ask ourselves, who are our palace dogs?
Wow.
What are the favorite ideas, the comfortable habits, or the preferred people that we automatically let off the hook when a project fails or a conflict arises?
That's a tough question.
It is. And conversely, who are the stray dogs? Who or what do we reflexively blame simply because they exist outside our inner circle, making them an easy target for our own unexamined biases?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. We all have that blind spot, protecting our internal palace dogs while looking for an external sewer to blame. Sometimes it just takes a highly abrasive truth to force us to see the reality in front of us.
Very true.
Well, we want to thank you so much for learning with us today. Be sure to stay hooked for the next story coming up on the Simplified Awakening channel, where we will continue to pull timeless strategies out of these incredible ancient texts. Until then, keep analyzing the data and don't let the palace dogs chew up your chariot.